there was some infidelity in the relationship, or there's something that transpired, was it harder for you to sit down and have a conversation and to tell her that something had happened outside the relationship, or losing the finals?
So, Gabrielle Union and Dwyane Wade have always been that couple that Hollywood tried to hold up as an example of real love done right. The red carpets, the family vacations, the blended home full of love and laughter. They made it look effortless. But behind those glossy photos, behind the tailored suits and the picture-perfect smiles, there's been tension simmering for years. And now, it looks like everything has finally boiled over. Because this story isn't just about one mistake or one argument. It's about a woman who built a life around forgiveness, and a man who never learned to stop testing the limits of it.
It's weird to say I'm head of household, because in this household, we split everything 50-50. But in the other households that each of us have to support, it puts this, there's always this like gorilla on your back that is like, you better work, bitch, you better work.
Before we talk about the cracks in the foundation, you have to understand how the house was built. Gabrielle and Dwyane first crossed paths back in 2007, both already carrying baggage from their past relationships. Gabrielle had just come out of a messy split, and Dwyane was still legally married to his high school sweetheart, Siobhan Funches, the mother of his two sons. On the outside, he was a devoted husband and father. But inside that marriage, things were already falling apart. When Gabrielle entered the picture, people started whispering. Their chemistry was too strong, too immediate. Paparazzi photos started surfacing. The smiles looked a little too genuine, the body language a little too familiar. Dwyane swore up and down that Gabrielle had nothing to do with his divorce, that his marriage was already broken before she came along. But that didn't stop fans from speculating that she was the reason the final straw snapped.
We decided together, because I think I said one time we was in Miami, I said something about it being my house that I paid for. My wife looked at me, she was like, you will never say that to me again when it's something that we share. And so my wife was like, that when we moved to LA, I got half on it. You will never say my house again.
Wow. And let's be real, Hollywood has a long memory. The same fans who once rooted for Gabrielle as the it girl in Bring It On started side-eyeing her as the other woman. But Gabrielle, always the picture of poise, brushed it off. She said in interviews that she'd learned from her past mistakes, that she was focused on healing and love. And for a while, it looked like she and Dwyane had built something solid. They went public in 2010, and the media turned them into a brand. Gab and D. Wade, the power couple, red carpets, magazine covers, charity galas. He was the NBA superstar. She was the Hollywood queen. Together, they looked untouchable. But behind the scenes, the cheating whispers never stopped. One woman came forward and said point blank that she had a situation with Dwyane, claiming he flew women out and kept a rotation going behind Gabrielle's back.
Harder for you to sit down and have a conversation and to tell her that something had happened outside the relationship, or losing the finals?
Way harder to have a conversation with my now.
Her words were brutal. They act like they're Michelle and Barack, but things are not what they seem. And as wild as it sounded, people couldn't ignore how believable it was. Because Dwyane already had a reputation for being a little too friendly when the cameras weren't rolling. Still, Gabrielle stayed quiet. She didn't feed into the gossip, didn't clap back, she just kept smiling. But that silence said more than words ever could. Because sometimes silence isn't peace, it's self-protection. Then, in 2013, they announced a breakup. They called it a mutual decision, saying they needed space to focus on themselves. But everyone knew something had gone wrong. The timing was off, the tone was off, and for the first time, Gabrielle looked like she was tired. Not just from work, but from pretending. Then came the twist that changed everything. During that so-called break, Dwyane got another woman pregnant, his longtime friend, Aja Matoyer. When that news broke, it hit like a bomb. The math didn't math. Because the timeline of the breakup and the conception overlapped in a way that made everyone wonder if it was really a break at all. Dwyane later admitted that the baby, his son Xavier, was conceived while he and Gabrielle were apart. But even he couldn't pretend it was easy to explain. He said in an interview that telling Gabrielle about the child was the hardest conversation of his life. He described it like he'd faced a firing squad, terrified, ashamed, knowing it might be the end. And it almost was. Gabrielle was devastated. Years later, she described that moment in her memoir with haunting honesty. She said that finding out about that child felt like being hit by a wave she couldn't swim through. That there were no words for the kind of betrayal that forces you to question everything you thought was real. She admitted she didn't even know how to process it, that therapy helped, but the scar never fully faded. Still, she forgave him, not because she was weak, but because she believed in the version of love they'd built. Or at least, the version she thought they could rebuild. They got married in 2014, and for a while, it looked like they'd made it through the storm. They posted family photos, they laughed in interviews, they became a blended family with Dwyane's older kids and their own daughter, Kavya. But even then, people noticed something strange. Dwyane proudly showed off his children from his marriage with Siobhan, and he embraced fatherhood in the spotlight, except when it came to Xavier. The son he'd had during the break was always absent from the picture, rarely mentioned, rarely seen. Fans noticed. They started calling it the invisible child situation. It was the one piece of Dwyane's reality that didn't fit into the perfect family photo. And that's where the cracks in the facade started showing again. Because even after the vows, the house, and the matching smiles, Gabrielle still seemed to be carrying something heavy. The interviews changed. Her tone shifted. One day, she casually mentioned in an interview that she and Dwyane split their bills 50-50. At first, it sounded like modern love, equality, partnership, teamwork. But then, fans realized something. Dwyane was worth over $170 million. Gabrielle, around $40 million. So why was she paying half? When people pressed Dwyane about it, he admitted that the 50-50 rule came after an argument. He had once called their Miami house his house, and Gabrielle checked him on it immediately. She told him he'd never say that again, because from then on, everything would be split evenly. He said it proudly, like it was proof of their equality. But to fans, it sounded like proof that Gabrielle had to earn her place in a house she helped build. People started whispering that maybe she wasn't as secure in the marriage as she seemed, that maybe the balance was never emotional, it was transactional. Gabrielle tried to defend their setup. She said, "We're both in our second marriages. We're trying to do it right this time," but her words didn't sound convincing anymore. It felt like she was trying to convince herself as much as the audience, because deep down, everyone knew. When a woman has to keep proving her worth in her own home, something's broken. And sure enough, the same gossip blogs that first broke Dwyane's cheating rumors years ago started whispering again. New faces, new friends, new messages. Fans began noticing Gabrielle's posts, cryptic captions about peace, healing, and clarity. Photos of her daughter with no sign of Dwyane in the frame. Then people noticed both of them had stopped wearing their wedding rings. That's when it hit everyone. Maybe the fairy tale really had ended. An insider said Gabrielle had started talking to divorce lawyers quietly, that she was trying to plan her next move without turning it into another Hollywood circus. Because if there's one thing Gabrielle Union learned the hard way, it's that love in public can be humiliation in private. And yet, even with everything we know, this story isn't just about infidelity or betrayal. It's about what happens when love becomes a performance, and both actors start forgetting where the script ends and the truth begins. Because Gabrielle Union once said she stayed because she believed in growth and redemption. But how many times can you rebuild something that keeps breaking in the same place? When people look at Gabrielle Union and Dwyane Wade now, they see two polished, accomplished adults who built an empire together. But if you trace the roots of their story, you realize that what looks like growth was always survival disguised as love. They were both coming from pain. And instead of healing separately, they decided to heal inside a relationship that was already cracked. Gabrielle has always been open about how much her first marriage scarred her. Her ex-husband, former NFL player Chris Howard, cheated on her repeatedly. And she admitted that, back then, she didn't really understand what healthy love looked like. She said she used to confuse chaos for chemistry, thinking passion had to hurt. That mindset never fully left her, even when she found Dwyane. By the time they met, Dwyane was fresh out of a storm too. A bitter divorce and custody battle with his ex-wife Siobhan that played out in the headlines. Court filings, public arguments, accusations of neglect. It was all there for the world to see. And in the middle of it, Gabrielle stepped into his life as the calm he thought he needed. But what people forget is that sometimes when you walk into someone's healing season, you end up inheriting all their pain. At first, Gabrielle tried to play the role of the supportive partner. She showed up at games, stood by him through legal fights, and took heat online when Siobhan accused her of being a homewrecker. Gabrielle brushed it off, saying that love was worth fighting for. But even then, you could tell she was trying to prove something. Maybe to the world, maybe to herself. When Dwyane's break baby news hit in 2013, everything Gabrielle had worked to rebuild came crashing down. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was humiliation. She had defended this man through every rumor, fought his battles, ignored the whispers. And now, the same headlines she used to roll her eyes at were suddenly about her. Friends close to Gabrielle said that was her breaking point. Not because of the child itself. Gabrielle has always been fiercely protective of children, even the ones who aren't biologically hers, but because of the deceit. The idea that while she was out in public holding him down, he was somewhere else creating another life. But instead of walking away for good, she stayed, and that decision changed everything. She once said she stayed because she believed in grace, that she'd been through too much not to give someone a second chance. But that grace came with a cost. People started seeing her as the woman who tolerated everything for the sake of image. When they got married in 2014, Gabrielle wore the title Mrs. Wade proudly, but the power dynamics were already off. He was the NBA icon, the millionaire athlete. She was successful, yes, but in that world, he was the headline and she was the footnote. That's why the 50-50 conversation hit a nerve for so many people. It wasn't about money. It was about balance. When Dwyane admitted that Gabrielle started paying half after he made a slick comment about his house, fans saw that as emotional debt disguised as equality. It sounded like she was trying to buy her place at the table. And maybe, in a way, she was. Because Gabrielle has always been a woman who fights for her worth, on screen, off screen, and even at home. But in this marriage, every fight seemed to leave her a little smaller. Then came the interviews. Gabrielle talking about anxiety, imposter syndrome, the feeling of always needing to earn her peace. Fans started connecting dots. It wasn't just Hollywood pressure, it was emotional exhaustion. She once said she wakes up every day thinking about the financial responsibilities she carries, about how failure isn't an option. That kind of mindset doesn't come from comfort. It comes from living in constant defense mode, and it's not hard to see why. Every time Dwyane's name popped up in the blogs, it was another story about some mystery woman or flirty behavior. He'd go viral for a night out, a trip without his ring, or an eyebrow-raising post. And Gabrielle would show up online the next day with something poetic about clarity or peace. It became their rhythm. He embarrassed her. She handled it gracefully. But grace doesn't mean peace. And by the time 2023 rolled around, people started noticing the distance. The photos of them together slowed down. The posts became less affectionate. And then fans realized neither of them had worn their wedding rings in weeks. Insiders said Gabrielle had finally reached her limit. The other woman rumor started making its rounds again. Someone connected to Dwyane's business circle. Someone he'd been seen talking closely with. And while the details stayed blurry, the energy shifted fast. Gabrielle's posts started getting sharper. Phrases like, truth brings freedom, and peace over performance. She wasn't naming names, but everyone knew who she meant. Then came the interviews where she stopped referring to him in present tense. Small details, but telling ones. No we, just me. Meanwhile, Dwyane kept up his usual calm act. Family photos with the kids, motivational quotes, business updates. But fans noticed something odd. He'd post his children, but not Gabrielle. And when he did mention her, it felt forced, like a man doing damage control. People close to them said the silence in their house was louder than any argument. They were both still there, but emotionally, they'd already left. And that's what makes this story so complicated. Because Dwyane and Gabrielle weren't your typical Hollywood couple thrown together for attention. They genuinely tried to make it work. They went to therapy, they wrote books about healing, they built careers around resilience. But when the foundation of a relationship is built on pain, even love can start feeling like labor. And the truth is, both of them carry scars that made this marriage fragile from the start. Gabrielle's fear of abandonment made her hold on tighter. Dwyane's ego, shaped by fame, success, and control, made him believe he could have everything without consequence. Together, they created something beautiful but brittle. Fans who once saw them as the blueprint for Black love are now realizing they were more like the warning. Because the truth is, forgiveness without accountability just becomes a cycle. And every time you go back, you lose another piece of yourself. Gabrielle once said she forgave Dwyane not for him, but for her own peace. But peace doesn't mean pretending. And from the looks of it, she's finally done pretending. By the time the rumors about her consulting divorce lawyers started circulating, it didn't even shock anyone. It just felt inevitable. After years of playing the peacemaker, the nurturer, the woman who understands, Gabrielle Union was ready to choose herself. And Dwyane, he's been here before. The public sympathy, the image cleanup, the redemption arc. But this time, the narrative feels different. Because it's not just about one mistake, it's about a pattern. And Gabrielle's not interested in patterns anymore. By the time the latest cracks in Gabrielle Union and Dwyane Wade's marriage started showing, it was clear this wasn't just another Hollywood rough patch. It was the breaking point of a love story that had been fighting itself for years. For so long, the world saw them as the blueprint, the power couple who had it all together. But what people forget is that every perfect couple is carrying a private weight. And for Gabrielle and Dwyane, that weight was built from years of sacrifice, silence, and wounds that never really healed. After everything they'd survived, the cheating scandals, the break baby, the 50-50 debates, it wasn't one explosive fight that tore them apart this time. It was erosion, the slow, quiet kind that eats away at trust grain by grain until there's nothing left to hold on to. Gabrielle started pulling back. She stopped posting photos of them together. The captions that once radiated gratitude and devotion turned into subtle messages about strength, boundaries, and healing. She talked more about her daughter, Kavya, and less about her marriage. Fans could feel the shift. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. One of her last big interviews gave everything away without saying much at all. She spoke about how love shouldn't mean constant repair, how being strong doesn't mean staying. She said, when you reach a certain peace, you stop confusing endurance for love. It wasn't an announcement. It was a realization. Meanwhile, Dwyane seemed to be living in a strange mix of denial and image management. He posted more about his kids, his projects, his growth journey. But the warmth between him and Gabrielle, the spark that used to light up red carpets and interviews, was gone. His words were clean, polished, almost too calm. Like a man who knew he'd lost something real but didn't want the world to see the panic. Insiders said that privately, Gabrielle had already separated herself emotionally. She was focused on motherhood, on her business ventures, on her voice as an advocate and producer. Dwyane, on the other hand, was still trying to play the role of the family man, showing up for optics, but missing in spirit. And when both people in a relationship start living in different emotional worlds, the love doesn't just die. It fades in plain sight. This wasn't the first time Gabrielle had faced heartbreak, but it might be the first time she decided not to fix it. Her friends say she's been clear this time. No more healing him, no more understanding phase, no more justifying his behavior as growth. She's finally protecting her peace like it's sacred. And honestly, that's what makes this story powerful, because it's not about a celebrity marriage falling apart. It's about what happens when a woman finally decides she's done carrying a relationship that doesn't carry her back. For years, Gabrielle has been painted as the strong one, the resilient wife, the woman who forgives, the one who holds the family together. But strength has a limit, and love that constantly demands proof will always run out of grace. People online have had mixed feelings about it. Some say this is karma, that Gabrielle once played a role in Dwyane's first marriage ending, and that what goes around came around. Others say she doesn't deserve this, that she loved him through everything, stood by him when most women would have walked. Maybe both things are true. Because sometimes life doesn't hand out punishment or reward, just perspective. If you look at how Gabrielle moves now, there's something different in her energy. She's lighter. Her smile doesn't look forced. Her interviews sound free. She's not explaining, not defending, not performing. She's just existing, and that piece speaks louder than any statement ever could. And Dwyane? He's still the same polished public figure, still posting about discipline and success. But the comments under his posts tell another story. People reminding him of the woman who stood by him through every storm, only for him to become the storm she had to escape. Because at the end of the day, it's not the cheating scandal that defines this story. It's the realization that sometimes the person you thought was your peace was really just your distraction. Gabrielle Union spent over a decade proving that love could survive anything. But love isn't supposed to be survival. It's supposed to be safety. And when that safety disappears, even the strongest woman has to walk away. So whether you see this as the end of a fairy tale or the start of a comeback, one thing's certain: Gabrielle's story is bigger than heartbreak. It's about reclamation, reclaiming her worth, her time, her peace, and her name after years of carrying someone else's mistakes. And that's the part people forget when they talk about forgiveness. You can forgive someone and still choose yourself. If there's one thing Gabrielle Union's journey reminds us of, it's this. Sometimes, peace isn't found in holding it together. It's found in finally letting go. Because no matter how public the pain or private the healing, walking away from what breaks you will always be the most powerful form of love there is. Make sure you hit that like button, drop your thoughts below, and subscribe. Because the stories that look perfect on the outside, those are usually the ones worth looking closer at.